Hello again, my friend. It is so lovely to have you back here with me, in the quiet of the night. As you lie here, your own heart beating a gentle, steady rhythm in your chest. Imagine it was once believed to be the very core of your soul and your mind. Tonight I want to take you on a gentle journey back to the warm sands of Egypt, where the line between life and death was a sacred golden thread. So let those heavy eyelids grow a little heavier. Shift your body just so, nestle into the softness beneath you, and let your breath become a slow, peaceful tide. Now let's begin. I promise you a journey filled with wonder, exploring the fascinating science behind ancient Egyptian mummification, one calming fact at a time. And if you happen to drift away to sleep before we finish, please know that is the greatest compliment of all. If a peaceful night like this one helps you to unwind, subscribe and I will be here waiting for you whenever you need a soft place to land. Now, let's begin. The heart was intentionally left inside the body during the mummification process because Egyptians believed it was the seat of intelligence and emotion. Picture the careful hands of the embalmer, working silently, preserving everything else, yet leaving that one precious organ to rest in its natural chamber. They saw it not just as a muscle, but as the compass of the soul, the quiet scribe recording every thought and feeling of a lifetime. They believed this vital organ would be needed during the weighing of the heart ceremony, a pivotal moment in the journey to the afterlife. There, in a hushed hall beyond the stars, the heart would be placed on a delicate golden scale, balanced against the single light feather of Ma'at, the goddess of truth and cosmic order, to determine a soul's purity. Natron, a naturally occurring salt mixture gathered from the Wadi Natron Valley, was the secret to the preservation process. Imagine the white, crystalline powder, harvested from the dry riverbeds, looking just like a dusting of snow under the relentless sun. This gentle mineral salt acted as a quiet desiccant, patiently performing its silent work on the body within the preparation tent. Over a sacred period of 40 days, it slowly, almost lovingly, drew all moisture from the tissues, halting time and decay. It created a peaceful, serene vessel, ensuring the body remained perfectly still and preserved, a tranquil home waiting for the soul's return throughout eternity. The brain was considered unimportant and was carefully removed through the nostrils using thin, floating bronze hooks. Picture the delicate precision of this ancient procedure, the priest's hand as steady as a moonbeam, his focus absolute. The long, slender tool was guided with a profound tenderness, seeking to clear the cranial cavity without leaving a single visible mark. Above all else, their goal was to protect the serene, sleeping expression on the person's face, that final, peaceful mask for eternity. They believed the heart was the mind's true home, and so this quiet, careful clearing was simply a preparation, leaving a perfect, undisturbed vessel of calm features behind. To protect the internal organs, priests used 4 specially crafted canopic jars, each guarded by one of the 4 sons of Horus. Picture them lined up in a sacred chest, their alabaster surfaces cool and smooth, glowing faintly in the low light of the tomb. Each vessel held a different treasure, the lungs, the liver, the stomach, and the intestines, keeping them safely cocooned in a quiet, eternal slumber. The human-headed Imseti watched over the liver, while the baboon-headed Hapi guarded the lungs, and the jackal-headed Duamutef protected the stomach. Each jar was a miniature fortress of calm, a silent sentinel ensuring the body rested whole and undisturbed in its journey through the beautiful West. A fragrant mixture of resins, cedar oil, and warm spices was layered over the skin to create a protective aromatic barrier. Imagine breathing in the air of that ancient embalming chamber, thick with the soothing, woody scent of cedar and the sweet warmth of myrrh and cinnamon. These precious oils, worth more than gold in the ancient world, were massaged gently into the body, anointing it for its long voyage. This fragrant, golden layer not only helped preserve the skin, keeping it supple and intact through the millennia, but it transformed a clinical process into a sacred sensory ritual. It filled the dim space with a calming perfume, an olfactory promise of sanctity, and a peaceful passage into the star-dusted fields of the afterlife. Imagine, if you will, hundreds of yards of fine linen, so pale it seemed to glow softly in the dim lamplight. The strips were wound carefully around the limbs, one over the other, in a meditative pattern that followed the body's own gentle curves. Each rotation was deliberate, a quiet rhythm that might have felt like a whispered prayer. Small protective amulets, such as the winged scarab carved from polished stone, were then gently tucked between these layers. It was a tender act, as if a mother were slipping a comforting token into her child's hand before a long journey. These sacred objects were meant to offer spiritual guidance, a silent companion through the shimmering, unknown fields of the afterlife. And then, before the tomb was sealed, a final sacred ritual took place, the opening of the mouth. A priest, his face hidden behind the jackal mask of Anubis, held a special adze. He touched its cool bronze tip to the lips, the eyes, and the ears of the mummy. The adze rested lightly, like a feather, on each quiet feature. In the deep silence of the burial chamber, this simple act was believed to symbolically restore the senses. It promised that the deceased would breathe, speak, and eat again in the shimmering fields of the afterlife. This peaceful rite, performed with whispered incantations, transformed the still form into a living soul ready to walk among the gods. As the centuries turned, a quiet transformation occurred. Mummification, once the exclusive privilege of pharaohs and their innermost circles, slowly extended its gentle embrace. During the Middle Kingdom, merchants, artisans, and even ordinary farmers began to afford simpler versions of the sacred rites. It was as if the entire community whispered a collective wish to join their ancestors in the fields of reeds. This shift reflected a beautiful, deepening desire that not just a single king, but a whole people might find a quiet, everlasting existence beyond the setting sun. The embalmers adapted their art, using less lavish oils and simpler linens, yet the love and care remained just as tender, a quiet act of communal devotion. They saw death not as a final parting, but as a journey that every soul deserved to take in peace. For high-ranking officials, the final resting place was not a simple box, but a nest of protective coffins, each one fitting inside the next like a set of nesting dolls. These were heavy sarcophagi, carved from wood or stone, shaped to mimic the body's serene silhouette. The outermost coffin often bore the sculpted face of the deceased, calm and serene, gazing out with a faint, knowing smile. To be placed inside was like being wrapped in a warm cocoon, layer upon layer of silent stone shielding the occupant from the outside world. Within this deep stillness, time lost its meaning. The nested coffins created a private universe, a sanctuary where the soul could dream undisturbed through the ages, floating in a timeless sleep until the gentle call of the gods. The entire mummification process was a slow, patient labor of love, taking approximately 70 days. This sacred number mirrored the moon's phases and the silent turning of the stars, aligning the transformation with the heavens. Each day brought a careful step, the removal of moisture, the anointing with fragrant oils, the rhythmic wrapping, all performed with profound reverence. The embalmers worked without haste, understanding they were crafting an eternal vessel. By the time the final strip of linen was tied, the form lay in peaceful radiance. 70 days, the time it takes the moon to complete its journey, and at its end, a birth into the starry sky. It seemed that the deceased would finally stand among the imperishable stars, a quiet soul welcomed back to the cosmic night. Imagine the ancient shores of Wadi Natron, where the earth offers its own gentle salt, natron, harvested with reverence from the quiet margins of the valley. This natural mineral, soft to the touch yet powerful in its action, was used by embalmers to draw out all moisture from the body, a process that unfolded over 40 silent days. As time passed, the tissues released their watery essence, drifting into a state of perfect dryness, like a leaf losing its suppleness in the autumn air. The natron worked unceasingly, a mineral whisperer that cradled the form in a timeless suspension, so that it might endure through all the tomorrows of eternity. It was a quiet transformation, a slow surrender managed with such care, leaving the body peaceful and intact, ready for the sacred wrappings to come. And once the body was dried, attention turned inward to the heart, which was left resting within its bony chamber. The Egyptians saw this organ not as a mere pump, but as the seat of intelligence, emotion, and the soul's quiet record of every lived moment. They imagined that in the Hall of Judgment, this heart would be placed on a scale, delicately balanced against a single ostrich feather representing Ma'at, the goddess of truth and cosmic order. If the heart was light as that feather, untroubled by wrongdoing, it would allow the spirit to pass into the blissful fields beyond. Picture the scene in a dim, sacred chamber, where heart and feather wavered momentarily before settling into perfect equilibrium, a silent testament to a life of harmony. This belief infused the embalming with a tender respect, leaving the heart as a faithful companion for the soul's eternal journey. While the heart remained, the face required its own delicate ritual to keep the profile serene. The embalmers attended to the nasal cavities with quiet precision, filling these voids with small rolls of linen or aromatic resins, materials chosen for their softness and scent. The goal was to maintain the gentle contours, ensuring the cheeks stayed lifted and the nose held its shape against the pull of millennia. Imagine the face floating in eternal stillness, its features untouched by decay as if merely asleep in a dreamless calm. These soft fillers were like a whispered promise, cradling the visage in a state of perpetual rest, so that the departed might greet the afterlife looking just as they had in life. It was a quiet art, a sculpting of silence that honored the person's earthly form with enduring dignity. The brain, however, was seen as a lesser organ, and was gently removed through the nostril with a thin bronze hook. This tool was eased with a surgeon's precision, its curve reaching into the cranial vault to fragment and draw out the soft matter in a slow, rhythmic dance of hands. Once the space was empty, it was cleansed and then filled with fragrant oils and sweet-smelling resins, poured in like liquid amber that would eventually set firm. These oils preserved the inner architecture, releasing a scent that whispered of myrrh and cedarwood groves. This transformation turned the mind's house into a vessel of perfumed stillness, a sacred cavity purified for the soul's voyage through the underworld. It was a process done not with haste, but with a hushed respect for the temple that once held thought. Beside the body, canopic jars of alabaster or clay stood in solemn vigil, each one a tiny sanctuary for a vital organ. The stomach, intestines, lungs, and liver were nestled inside, guarded by the four sons of Horus, divine protectors who watched over the dead with eternal patience. Each jar bore a lid carved with the head of one of these gods, a baboon, a falcon, a human, and a jackal, their gazes fixed on infinity. These organs were kept close, suspended in a soft slumber like children under a watchful sky, ensuring they remained safe from harm. Picture the jars arranged in a silent row, their surfaces smooth and cool to the touch, containing the whispers of life that once pulsed within. They were not just containers but sacred covenants, promising every part of the self would be reunited in the afterlife, a quiet symphony of preservation under a timeless canopy of stars. Once the body had been thoroughly dried by the natron salts, the embalmers began the meticulous process of wrapping. They used hundreds of yards of the finest linen strips, soft and pale as moonlight, winding them layer upon layer with patient, reverent hands. Within these folds, the priests tucked small amulets carved from gold and deep blue lapis lazuli, polished until they seemed to glow from within. Each amulet was a tiny sun, placed to radiate a warm, protective light that would guide the soul through the shadowed paths ahead. It was as if they were weaving a second skin of comfort and sacred geometry, ensuring the deceased would never feel cold or alone in the vastness of eternity. In a hushed ceremony, the opening of the mouth ritual was performed with the gentlest of touches. A priest would use a ritual tool, often shaped like a miniature adze, and trace it lightly across the lips and face of the wrapped mummy. This was no mere symbolic gesture, it was an awakening. They believed this delicate act restored every sense, breath, speech, sight, and hearing, so the soul could inhale the cool, sweet air of the afterlife and speak softly in the presence of Osiris. Imagine that first breath, like a breeze stirring the reeds along the Nile, as the dead opened their eyes to a world of perpetual twilight and whispered their name into the sacred halls. The wrappings were saturated with cedar oil and aromatic myrrh, their fragrance drifting through the tomb like a memory of distant gardens. The scent was sweet yet resinous, a deliberate echo of the floral landscapes of the Field of Reeds, that peaceful paradise where souls would wander forever among swaying blossoms and still waters. As the linen absorbed these oils, it created a preservative cocoon that not only protected the flesh but also filled the air with a promise of a land without sorrow. To the Egyptians, the perfume was a map. Every breath taken in the next world would be guided by this familiar, comforting sweetness, leading the spirit toward its eternal home. In the later dynasties, mummification evolved into a soft science of restoration. Embalmers would carefully pack the body with sawdust and extra linen, sculpting a rounded and graceful silhouette beneath the wrappings. The goal was not mere preservation, but the illusion of peaceful slumber, a person in deep, restful sleep, as if they might dream their way into eternity. There was a tenderness in this craft, a determination to make death look like a gentle repose. The result was a form that held no trace of suffering, only the serene contours of someone who had simply closed their eyes and drifted away, buoyed by layers of devotion. The sarcophagi themselves were painted in deep blues and warm golds, mimicking the starry night sky of the Egyptian cosmos. These vessels were not just boxes of stone or wood, they were quiet cocoons, cradling the deceased in a floating embrace of celestial protection. The golden stars and lapis lazuli background transformed the coffin into a miniature heaven, so the mummy would wake directly into that painted sky. It was as if each sarcophagus was a silent lullaby, rocking the soul across the waters of the underworld, while Nut, the sky goddess, stretched her body above in eternal watchfulness. Hey, still drifting through these starry sarcophagi? That's all right. Just let these ancient images hold you. If you're finding peace here, a gentle light guides other dreamers to this soft corner of the night. In the quiet ceremony of mummification, the heart was left resting in the chest, untouched and safe. The ancient Egyptians saw the heart not just as a muscle, but as the home of the soul and the center of all thought. They believed that in the great hall of the afterlife, this very heart would be placed on a golden scale, balanced against a single white feather, the feather of Maat, the goddess of truth and harmony. If the heart was light with a life of peace and kindness, the soul would journey on into a blissful eternity. To prepare the body for that long sleep, the embalmers turned to a gift from the desert, a soft, white salt called natron. It was gathered from the shores of a sacred valley, where the earth sparkled with natural crystals. The body was laid to rest in this warm, dry embrace for 40 days, and the natron worked quietly, like time itself, drawing away every trace of moisture. Bit by bit, the skin and tissues were held in a gentle stasis, preserved so the form would endure through the ages, a still and silent vessel waiting for the soul's return. A deep tenderness guided the next step, restoring the face so it would appear at peace. Embalmers slipped soft pads of linen or drops of sweet resin beneath the skin of the cheeks and the hollow of the neck. They shaped the features with a dreamer's care, smoothing away the hardness of death, so the lips seemed almost to smile. This was not just preservation, it was an act of love, a promise that when the spirit floated back to its body in a twilight dream, it would recognize the familiar contours of its earthly home and slip inside without fear. Beyond the heart, the other organs were honored with their own quiet chambers. The liver, the lungs, the stomach, and the intestines were each wrapped and placed into 4 exquisite jars called Canopic jars. These were no ordinary vessels, but small, luminous shrines watched over by the 4 sons of Horus. One had the calm face of a human, another the wise eyes of a baboon, the third the sharp gaze of a jackal, and the fourth the proud beak of a falcon. They stood as eternal guardians, keeping the organs safe in a slumber as deep and still as the stars. At last, the body was anointed with the rarest oils brought from lands of legend. Cedar oil from the tall forests of Lebanon was brushed over the skin, along with myrrh from the sun-drenched realm of Punt, its scent like honeyed incense. These golden liquids seeped into the flesh and hardened into a waterproof seal, wrapping the body in a warm, aromatic cocoon. It smelled of ancient groves and distant seaside breezes, a perfume that would linger through the millennia, a final loving lullaby for the one who rests, dreaming peacefully, waiting for the dawn. We are drifting now, deeper into the quiet wisdom of the ancients, where even the end of life was held in a gentle embrace. Their rituals were not about sorrow, but about a slow, loving preparation for a dream that would last forever. Imagine the body lying still, as if in a deep slumber, and the embalmer's hands moving with the softness of a breeze. The brain, that restless part that thinks and worries, was not needed where they were going. Through the nose, ever so carefully, a thin bronze hook would lift it out, bit by bit. This was a removal done with such calm precision, it seemed almost like setting a bird free from a cage. The mind could simply float away, making room for a light, spiritual essence to settle in, pure and peaceful. And then came the wrappers, the masters of linen. They would spend hours, sometimes days, wrapping the form in endless ribbons of fine cloth. Hundreds of yards of fabric would circle the body, layer upon layer, like a cocoon spun by patient silkworms. In the hidden folds they tucked tiny amulets, glinting softly. The heart scarab rested over the chest, a small stone beetle that carried a silent prayer for safety. Its inscription whispered, "Do not stand as a witness against me." So the heart could remain still, unburdened as the soul traveled through the shadows of the underworld. This tender preservation was not only for those wrapped in gold. There were 3 paths of care, each one suited to what a family could give. The most elaborate involved many steps, but even the simplest was filled with grace. Some bodies were prepared with injections of warm cedar oil. The oil would flow inside, a fragrant river, gently dissolving what would decay, leaving behind only bone and skin, a modest vessel ready for the long rest. It was a humble way, but still it led to eternity, just as the great pharaohs did, bathed in the same soft promise of forever. And before the tomb could close its quiet door, there was one last sacred moment. The opening of the mouth ceremony. Priests would gather around the wrapped figure, their voices low and melodic. They held a special tool, a small adze, sometimes a fish-tailed blade. With it, they would touch the lips. They touched the eyes, the ears, the nose. This symbolic act awakened the senses from sleep, so that the person could breathe again, could speak sweet words, could enjoy the taste of bread and the scent of lotus blossoms in the afterlife. It was a gentle rebirth into a world of soft sensations, a quiet restoration of all that makes us feel alive. Finally, the body was laid to rest in a stone coffin, a sarcophagus. Often carved from pale limestone, it was like a cradle for the stars. Its sides showed lotus flowers floating on calm waters, their petals open to an invisible sun. Celestial boats sailed across the lid, carrying gods through the Milky Way. This was not a box of endings, but a house for a soul that would live on, drifting in perpetual stillness. Within those cool stone walls, the spirit could rest under a golden light that never faded, in a silence that was not empty but full of peace. And there, the sleeper remains, afloat in an endless dream, until the world itself grows old. We continue our gentle drift through the quiet chambers of ancient preparation, where every act was a whispered prayer for the journey ahead. In the stillness of the wrapped body, one organ remained untouched, resting exactly where it belonged. The heart lay peacefully within the chest, never removed, never disturbed. To the Egyptians, this was no simple muscle. It was the house of thought, the cradle of emotion, the very essence of a person's being. They believed that every memory, every feeling, every quiet truth echoed from within its chambers, and so it waited, silent and still, for the most important moment of all. In the great hall of judgment, beneath the watchful eyes of the gods, the heart would be placed on a golden scale. On the other side rested a single feather, the feather of Ma'at, so light it could barely stir the air. If the heart was as light as that feather, unburdened by wrongdoing or regret, then the soul had lived in harmony. Only then could the spirit pass through, into the fields of eternal light. The secret to preserving this vessel for that timeless journey lay in a simple gift from the earth. It came from a valley far away, a place called Wadi Natron, where the land shimmered with white. There, beneath the sun, a natural salt called natron would form, born from the drying of ancient lake waters. The embalmers gathered this sacred mineral, knowing it held a quiet kind of magic. They packed it gently around the body, and over the many days that followed, the natron did its work in silence. It was a slow embrace, a soft drawing out of moisture, leaving only what needed to remain. The tissues surrendered their heaviness, becoming light, dry, and perfectly still. What was once flesh became something close to parchment, a delicate form that could endure through centuries. This was not a harsh process, but a tender one, a gentle kiss from the earth that readied the body for its long sleep. And when the natron was brushed away, the remains held the quiet promise of forever. The embalmers desired more than just preservation. They wanted the face to be peaceful, to wear the look of one who simply rests. With careful hands, they took small pads of linen, sometimes filled with soft sawdust, and tucked them beneath the eyelids. Each placement was an act of love, a gentle restoration of what life had once shaped. Under the skin of the cheeks they added more of these delicate linens, smoothing the contours until the face appeared full and calm. The hollows of sleep vanished, replaced by a soft, lifelike fullness. It was as though the person had laid down only moments ago, sighing into a quiet, timeless nap. The mouth would seem ready to part, the eyes as if fluttering beneath closed lids. All traces of struggle were erased, leaving only a serene expression, a quiet smile for the ages. This was the final gift of the embalmers, to craft a face that spoke not of death, but of a deep and undisturbed peace. And yet, not all parts of the body were deemed essential for this eternal rest. The brain was seen as secondary, its purpose fleeting in the grand scheme of the soul. The embalmers approached it with a gentle reverence, wanting to leave the head's outward shape untouched. Through the nasal passage, they carefully guided a polished bronze hook, its curve smooth and cool. With patient, slow movements, they extracted the soft matter bit by bit, never breaking the skin, never marring the brow. The process was deliberate and quiet, almost a meditation in itself. The skull remained perfectly intact, the face serene, the contours undisturbed. In this way, the head rested in its natural form, cradled by linen and stillness. The peaceful expression that had been so carefully shaped would stay forever, unaltered by any visible sign of what lay within. It was a quiet removal, a letting go of what was not needed, while the outer calm remained unbroken for all the centuries to come. The final touch came from far across the sea, from a land called Punt, shrouded in myth and rich in treasure. From there, traders brought precious resins, gathered from trees that wept golden tears. These resins were poured slowly over the wrapped body, warming under the desert air to form a shining seal. It was like a gentle blanket of light, protecting the skin beneath from the passage of time. The fragrance was soft and sweet, a perfume of cedar and spice that clung to the air inside the burial chamber. As the years turned into centuries, that scent lingered, a quiet whisper of eternity sealed within the stone. The body now lay wrapped in gold and scent, ready for the long journey. The precious oils not only guarded the flesh, they filled the dark space with the memory of living trees and distant shores. It was a final blessing, a warm embrace of fragrance that would greet the soul when it returned to its resting place, long after the world above had forgotten. Canopic jars, carved from the soft glow of translucent alabaster, sat like silent companions in the tomb. They were quiet guardians for the stomach, the lungs, the liver, and the intestines. Each lid was sculpted into the face of one of the four sons of Horus. Their steady, protective gaze watched over the organs with a patience that stretched beyond time, a gentle vigilance that never wavered. The wrapping of the body was a slow and rhythmic art, a ceremony of linen and whispered devotion. Hundreds of yards of fine bandages were layered with care, each turn a small prayer. Between the layers, priests tucked amulets of turquoise and carnelian, tiny beacons of color against the pale cloth. These charms were meant to guide the soul through the soft, misty paths of the afterlife, a quiet compass for the journey ahead. In later periods, a dark mineral called bitumen was brushed over the body in thick, warm coats. It dried into a deep, obsidian-like shell, a protective husk that sealed the form away from time. The body became a still, dark sculpture, shielded from the drifting sands and the long passage of years, as if suspended in a dream of endless preservation. Then came the opening of the mouth, a ceremony so tender it felt like a lullaby for the spirit. A priest would touch a special tool to the face of the deceased, gently, symbolically restoring the senses. With this simple act, the spirit could breathe again, speak again, and taste the offerings of honey and fresh bread that waited in the peaceful fields of Aro. It was a reawakening into a world of quiet abundance. And finally, the sarcophagus. Its lid was often painted with deep blues and warm golds, a map of a starry night sky turned inward. As the heavy lid lowered into place, the deceased was not trapped but embraced. They were wrapped in a cosmic blanket, floating forever among quiet stars, a tiny point of light in a vast silent universe. Deep within the body, the heart remained untouched, cradled in the chest like a precious secret. The ancient Egyptians believed it was the very center of thought and the home of the soul, a little drum of wisdom beating softly through life. When the time came, in the weighing of the heart ceremony, this organ was placed on one side of a great scale. On the other side rested a single feather, a symbol of truth, light and pure. The balance had to be perfect, for that was the key to a peaceful passage into the afterlife. Picture that moment, so still and sacred, where the heart's weight was measured against the air itself. It was a judgment of silence, a final breath of justice before the journey beyond. The secret to eternal preservation lay in natron, a salt that formed naturally along the shores of a lake in Wadi Natron. This mineral was warm and crystalline, almost like tiny stars gathered from the earth. Over 40 days it was packed around the body, gently drawing out moisture like a slow, patient tide. The tissues drifted into a state of permanent stillness, as if time itself had paused for this one being. Each grain of salt whispered to the flesh, calming it into a lasting peace. It was a quiet transformation, a sinking into a sleep so deep that the world outside faded away, leaving only a serene, preserved form. The other vital organs were entrusted to 4 canopic jars, each one a masterpiece of care. Their lids were shaped like the heads of guardian gods, the sons of Horus, who watched with serene and eternal eyes. Inside, the liver, lungs, stomach, and intestines were nestled in a soft cradle, as if held by hands unseen. These jars didn't just store them, they cherished these parts of the body, keeping them safe for the afterlife. It was a tender ritual, a way of honoring every element that made a person whole. The jars stood silently, like guardians of small, precious worlds, wrapped in an embrace that would never end.
The brain was considered a secondary guest in the body, its presence less vital to the eternal self. So, with slender bronze hooks, the practitioners reached gently through the nasal passage, easing it out with a careful hand. This delicate operation was done so quietly that the face kept its peaceful composure, as if dreaming. It was like removing a soft whisper from a shell, leaving the cavity clean and still. The serene expression was never broken, a mask of calm that held through the ages. This was a cleansing, a gentle clearing for the spirit's long voyage into the quiet beyond.
Finally, the skin was anointed with rare resins and aromatic oils, like cedar oil and myrrh. These golden essences were brushed on with tender strokes, keeping the flesh supple and fragrant for eternity. They created a shimmering protective layer, a thin veil that glowed softly in the dim light. It was as if the body was being wrapped in a last ray of sunset, sealing it against the wear of time. The scent was a gentle memory, a lingering sweetness that spoke of sacred gardens. This final blessing cocooned the form in an amber embrace, a shield of perfume and light for the endless sleep ahead. The linen bandages were wrapped with a quiet, mindful precision, each layer laid down as if tucking a child into bed. Hundreds of yards of fine, woven fabric encased the body, turning it into a soft cocoon. Between these layers, the embalmers slipped tiny amulets carved from cool turquoise and warm carnelian. their colors bright against the pale cloth. A scarab to protect the heart, a tiny eye to watch over the sleeper, each one a whispered promise of calm and security for the long journey ahead. Before the tomb was sealed forever, a gentle ritual called the opening of the mouth was performed beside the mummy. A priest touched a small, curved tool to the lips and eyes of the still face, not to break the silence, but to kindle it with life. The gesture was slow, tender, as if waking someone from a very deep dream. In that hush, the soul was given breath again, and the senses stirred softly, ready to speak and listen in the quiet halls of the afterlife. Royal mummies rested within a series of nested sarcophagi, each box a loving shell around the one inside. These heavy containers were carved from deep stone or gleaming gold, their surfaces catching the faint torchlight in a shimmer that moved like water. The outermost box could weigh many tons, yet it felt less like a prison and more like a chrysalis. Inside, the king or queen lay curled in that protective darkness, wrapped in layer after layer of quiet, as if the whole world had paused to hold them safe. Ancient chemists discovered a golden secret: honey, with its gentle antibacterial touch, could preserve the body's warmth and texture across centuries. They brushed the sweet amber liquid over the skin before the bandages, a final anointment that sealed the flesh in a soft, timeless glow. The honey's thick sweetness never spoiled, keeping the memory of life close, like a faint echo of sunlight lingering on a sleeping face. The walls of the final resting place bloomed with painted lotus flowers and endless, flowing rivers. The blue petals seemed to sway in an unfelt breeze, and the water, though still, carried a sense of gentle motion across the plaster. These murals were not just art, they were windows into Aro, the field of reeds where souls drift in eternal serenity. A world of soft color and unending peace, where the heart floats downstream, weightless and at rest, forever. You are still here, drifting with the blue lotus on that quiet river. That is beautiful. Let the painted waters carry you deeper, into a stillness where even breath forgets to be needed. Deep within the still and quiet form, the heart was never taken away. The ancient embalmers left it resting in its sacred chamber, for they believed the heart was the very seat of thought and feeling, the core of intelligence and emotion. In the great hall of truth, where the soul would one day stand before the gods, this tender organ was to be weighed upon a scale. Against it would be placed the light, airy feather of Ma'at, the feather of truth and cosmic order. If the heart was as light as that feather, the soul's journey into peace would flow like a soft river. The heart remained in the body to keep the deepest self whole, a quiet anchor for the voyage beyond. The secret of the body's long stillness lay in a gentle gift from the earth, a naturally occurring salt called natron. It came from the valley of Wadi Natrun, a place where the land itself gathered this pure and drying mineral. The natron was packed around and within the form, and its soft crystals drifted through the tissues like a slow, patient whisper. It absorbed every trace of moisture, drawing out the waters that would let the body fade. Over 40 days, this tender process allowed the physical vessel to rest in perfect preservation, unmoving and serene, ready to wait for thousands of years. To keep the face in its calm expression, the brain was carefully removed through the delicate passage of the nose. With tiny bronze hooks, as fine as an artist's brush, the embalmers drew out the soft matter bit by bit, leaving the noble features untouched. There was no mark on the forehead, no disturbance to the gentle curve of the closed eyes. The face remained peaceful, as if the person were merely dreaming deeply. This meticulous care was a sacred labor, so that when the soul looked back upon its earthly form, it would see a serene reflection, a face ready to welcome the light of the afterlife. The other organs, the stomach, intestines, lungs, and liver, were placed in 4 exquisite containers known as canopic jars, carved from smooth alabaster or shaped from warm pottery. These jars held the soft inner parts in a protective embrace. Each jar was watched over by one of the 4 sons of Horus, spirits whose silent vigilance never wavered. Imseti guarded the liver, Hapi the lungs, Duamutef the stomach, and Qubisinuaf the intestines. Their calm and constant presence surrounded the organs like a gentle guard, keeping them safe and whole for the journey beyond the stars. Finally, a warm and fragrant resin was poured over the entire body. This golden sap, drawn from ancient trees that once whispered in distant groves, flowed softly like liquid sunlight. As it cooled, it formed a waterproof seal, a protective cocoon that wrapped the mortal form in an amber stillness. The resin shielded the body from the drifting sands of time, from the dampness of the earth, from the gentle decay that touches all living things. It was the last loving touch, a golden quiet that held the sleeper firmly yet softly, until the moment when the soul might awaken into a new horizon. As we drift deeper into this dream of ancient sleep, let us observe the sacred rituals that transform the dead into eternal beings. In the hushed chambers where the air was thick with myrrh, priests would softly chant sacred spells. Their voices were low murmurs that blended with the rustle of fine linen. With infinite patience, they wrapped the body in layer upon layer, hundreds of yards of delicate cloth. Between the folds, they tucked tiny amulets carved from turquoise and gold, each one a prayer for protection. The touch of their hands was slow and reverent. This gentle process was not one of fear, but of love, slowly cocooning the departed for a peaceful rest. The linen seemed to absorb the quiet incantations, holding them close like a whispered lullaby. The chamber was filled with the scent of cedar oil and the faint glow of oil lamps. Every movement was a meditation. After the wrapping, a tender ceremony awaited the mummy. It was called the opening of the mouth, and it was performed with a delicate tool shaped like a small adze. The priest would touch the lips, the eyes, the ears in a series of light, feathery gestures. This was not an invasive act, but a symbolic reawakening. The belief was that this soft ritual restored the senses to the body. Now, in the blessed realm of the afterlife, the soul could draw breath again. It could speak words of gratitude and inhale the sweet perfume of lotus blossoms and incense that would be offered forevermore. The touch was like the first kiss of dawn, gentle and full of promise. In that moment, the boundary between life and death became thin and transparent, like morning mist. The art of mummification was not a single path reserved for royalty. It branched into different tiers, like quiet streams leading to the same ocean. For the highest classes, the full 70 days were filled with elaborate rites, exotic spices, and the finest oils. The process was a symphony of care. Yet for those with simpler means, a more humble preparation was given. The body might be preserved with natron in a shorter time, wrapped in simpler cloth, but the same reverence echoed through the act. Even the poorest could hope for a gentle journey, wrapped in what love could afford, cradled in the thought of peace. Each method was a quiet promise that the soul would find its way home. Beside the body within the wooden coffin, a precious scroll was placed. This was the Book of the Dead, a papyrus filled with whispers of light. It was not a book of doom, but a gentle guide, a map of stars for the soul to navigate the dark underworld. The spells painted on it were soft affirmations, chants to soothe any fear. They helped the spirit float smoothly, like a feather on a warm breeze, past the guardians and through the hidden gates. The words wrapped the soul in a cloak of knowing, a calm certainty that the path was safe and the eternal fields were near. Reading these incantations, even in the stillness of the tomb, felt like hearing a mother's lullaby. Finally, the tomb itself was transformed into a garden of forever. Artists brushed soft colors onto the limestone walls, creating murals of blue lotus flowers blooming beside fields of golden wheat. These were not just decorations, but windows into an eternal landscape. The blue lotus, a symbol of rebirth, seemed to float on invisible water, its fragrance imagined in the silence. The golden wheat swayed in an unfelt breeze, promising abundance without end. In this serene, painted world, the spirit could drift endlessly, wrapped in perpetual peace, among blossoms that never lost their petals and grain that never knew the scythe. It was a quiet vision of paradise, a dream that never faded. Deep within the dimly lit chamber, the heart was the only organ left inside the body, untouched. The ancient Egyptians believed it was the seat of the soul, the quiet center of all thought and feeling. They imagined it as a little shrine where memories and love lived, cradled gently in the chest. They knew that one day, in the afterlife, this heart would be weighed against a single feather, the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of truth and cosmic balance. If the heart was light with a life of peace and honesty, the soul would pass on into an eternal field of light. It was a moment of profound stillness, where a lifetime's worth of kindness was held in the balance, as delicate as a feather drifting on a calm breeze. To prepare the body for its long sleep, the embalmers turned to the earth itself. They gathered a natural salt called natron from the dry, sun-scorched shores of the Wadi Natron Valley. They gathered it with reverence, knowing it held the power to still time itself. This soft white mineral was layered over the body with tenderness, and it worked in a gentle, patient way. It drifted through the tissues, drawing out every trace of moisture until the flesh became still and unchanging. What remained was a quiet vessel, preserved in a state of eternal rest, as if time itself had paused to hold it safe. The brain, they believed, was not needed for the journey ahead. They saw it as a tangle of thoughts, a clutter that would only weigh the spirit down. So, with the lightest touch, a slender bronze hook was eased through the nasal passage. Carefully, the matter was drawn out, leaving the face serene and whole. This was not an act of violence, but a careful clearing, a way of quieting the mind so the spirit could think with the heart alone. The body remained undisturbed on the outside, a perfect shell waiting softly for the soul's return.
Then, over the face, they placed a mask of gold. It shimmered with the warm light of 1,000 suns, an idealized portrait of the one who had passed. The eyes were wide and calm, the features smooth and timeless, like a face seen in a beautiful dream. The gold seemed to hold a gentle glow, even in the deepest darkness, a promise of the sun's return. This golden face was more than a covering, it was a beacon, a star-like light that would call the soul back to its resting place. It helped the spirit recognize its own form, so it would not wander lost among the quiet shadows of the tomb.
For 70 days, while the body lay wrapped in linen and natron, the priests whispered soft spells from the Book of the Dead. Their voices moved like a gentle wind through the chamber, reciting rhythm after rhythm. They chanted of hidden doors and secret paths, of the soul's flight toward a field of reeds where the sun never sets. Each word was a key, unlocking hidden gateways in the underworld, guiding the soul past dangers and toward a land of perpetual light. The chants were a bridge between this world and the next, a lullaby for the long night of eternity, promising that dawn would always come. Imagine the softest linen, woven from flax that once swayed in the warm breeze along the Nile. These lengths of fabric were wrapped around the body with such care, layer upon gentle layer until hundreds of yards of cloth held the sleeper in a tender embrace. Hidden within the folds, small amulets of turquoise and carnelian were placed like secret stars, their colors glowing with a quiet warmth. Each tiny charm was meant to offer protection, a soft light for the long journey ahead. From ancient trees, a golden sap was gathered, thick and fragrant with the memory of distant forests. This resin, warm and sticky, was slowly poured over the linen wrappings to seal every fold from the outside air. As it hardened, it created a waterproof shell, a honeyed cocoon that cradled the body in stillness. For thousands of years, this amber barrier held time at bay, keeping all within as serene as a still pond at twilight. In a quiet chamber nearby, 4 jars of alabaster and limestone stood like silent guardians. Each one held a precious part of the body, the stomach, the lungs, the liver, the intestines, kept safe in their cool stone hollows. Carved lids watched over these vessels, each one the face of a son of Horus, steadfast and eternal. Their vigil was silent, unbroken through the ages, a circle of protection that never slept. Before the wrapping began, the skin was anointed with cedar oil and spices brought from lands beyond the horizon. These aromatics were rubbed gently into the skin, leaving a sweetness that lingered like a gentle whisper. The scent was not of this earth alone, it was meant to echo the perfume of the divine realms. A cloud of peaceful fragrance enveloped the body, a fragrant breath that calmed all thoughts of decay and carried the spirit upward. At last, the sleeper was laid to rest in a chamber carved from pale limestone, deep within the quiet earth. The walls were painted with lotus flowers drifting on still waters and rivers that flowed without a sound. These soft murals were more than decoration, they were a dreamscape, a gentle promise of the fields of reeds where the spirit would wander forever in peace. Here, in this tranquil garden of stone, the soul could finally drift away, cradled by the silence into a land of eternal calm. The heart remained inside, cradled deep within the chest like a hidden ember. It was a warm, soft pulse in the profound silence of the body, the only organ left untouched by the embalmer's tools. They believed it held intelligence and the soul, a steady fire that never flickered out. In the hall of judgment, this heart would be weighed against the feather of Ma'at. That feather was so light, so airy, barely stirring the ancient stillness. It was a whisper of a feather, holding the weight of truth and justice. If the heart was as light as that feather, the soul found eternal peace, a soft, endless rest in the field of reeds under a gentle sky. Natron, a soft, natural salt from the sacred Wadi Natron Valley, was the profound secret to preservation. It was a humble mineral, but it worked so gently, so deeply. As a desiccant, it slowly, patiently drew moisture away from the tissues. Day by day, the body surrendered its liquid, growing still and dry like the desert sands. This quiet process took much time, but it lasted for thousands of years. The flesh was transformed into a form that was vast and enduring, a silent sentinel in the darkness of the tomb. They used soft resins and warm, golden myrrh, along with aromatic cassia. These were sweet, fragrant substances tucked into the silent, empty cavities. They created a scented barrier, holding back the slow, inevitable creep of time. The aroma was a warm embrace, filling the thick darkness with a gentle, protective stillness. It was a perfume against decay, a soft, invisible shield for the quiet body, keeping it safe in its silent, sacred journey. A thin, flexible bronze hook was used to remove the brain through the nasal passage. It was a delicate, almost tender procedure, done with such great care. The hook entered softly, like a whisper against the inner skull. It cleared the cranial space without disturbing the peaceful, mask-like expression of the face. The face remained calm, as if in a gentle, dreamless sleep, untouched by this quiet work. The skull was left empty, but the face still held its serene, silent grace, a soft mask of peace for all eternity. Canopic jars held the stomach, intestines, lungs, and liver. Each jar was guarded by one of the 4 sons of Horus, silent and ever-watching. These vessels were carved from alabaster or limestone, glowing with a soft, translucent light in the gloom. They stood like 4 sentinels, their surfaces cool and smooth against the eternal darkness. Their light was a gentle, steady presence, keeping the organs safe in their glowing, silent chambers. It was a soft, warm glow, a flicker of life in the cold, stone silence. Feel the linen, so soft against the skin, wrapping the body in intricate, overlapping layers. Imagine the fabric piling up, hundreds of yards of tender protection, a cocoon made by careful hands. Between these layers, priests hide tiny amulets crafted from gold and turquoise, their warmth and coolness a silent promise. They glow faintly, guiding the soul through the deep starless dark of the afterlife journey. This ritual was a long, quiet dream of protection, each amulet a tiny sentinel against the unknown. The air hangs still, filled with the scent of embalming herbs, as the body is readied for its eternal sleep. Then comes the opening of the mouth ceremony, a quiet, ritualistic dance of shadows. A priest leans close, using a special tool, maybe a small adze, to touch the wrapped lips and eyes. This act unfolds in deep silence, symbolically restoring the senses. It lets the spirit breathe the cool air of the afterlife, speak words of power, and eat the sweet sustenance of eternity. Imagine the gentle tap of the tool, the soft prayers whispered, awakening a world of sensation in the still, dark tomb. This moment was like a soft dawn in the darkness, the spirit stirring from its long sleep. The priest's hands move with deliberate grace, each gesture a key unlocking the doors of perception. Not just humans felt this care. Beloved pets, cats and ibises, were also mummified with gentle, loving hands. Their small bodies, wrapped in soft linen, drifted into eternity beside their owners. Picture a cat, its fur still soft under the bandages, or an ibis, its long beak pointing skyward. They rested in quiet companionship, a silent bond across the ages. The air might carry the faint scent of oils and resins, binding them together in a shared, endless dream. These animals were not just pets but loyal souls, their presence a comfort in the afterlife. The priests laid them down with the same reverence as humans, ensuring they would never walk alone. In the cool shade of the tomb, their spirits play together still. This practice grew from simple sand burials, where the desert winds dried the body, into a 70-day art of preservation. Each day echoed the slow, rhythmic turn of the stars, the cosmic dance of the night sky. Imagine the careful hands timing the natron baths and linen wraps to this celestial clock. Time felt like a deep, slow breath, measured out in salts and oils and whispered prayers. The alignment with the stars wove the body back into the fabric of the universe. This rhythm created a bridge between earth and sky, a quiet preparation for the vast journey ahead. The stars watched over the process, their light a gentle guide. 70 days, a single note in the harmony of eternity. The final tombs held Shabdi figures, small statuettes of deep blue and soft green. They stood in silent rows, their tiny hands ready to serve, promising a life of effortless leisure. Picture them like a quiet army, waiting to till the fields of the afterlife. These companions ensured the spirit never labored too hard, drifting instead through the reeds like clouds on a gentle breeze. In the stillness of the tomb, they whispered of perpetual peace and endless rest. Their presence was a soft lullaby, a promise of eternal comfort. The blue and green hues shimmered faintly in the lamplight, symbols of the Nile and new life. With them, the spirit could simply be, floating in a dream of serenity. Let your breathing slow. Let these words seep into the quiet of your mind like honey into warm milk. In the ancient embalmer's chamber, the heart was left to its own soft beating silence. It was the seat of intelligence, they said, the deep well of emotion, a warm red cave of feeling. When the soul journeyed beyond, it would enter a vast hall of perfect stillness. There, the heart would be placed on one side of a sacred scale, and on the other, the feather of Ma'at, a plume so light it might float on a breath. The weighing was a peaceful trial, a gentle measure of purity. A heart as light as that feather would open the way to a seamless, endless dawn, a place of soft light and no more sorrow. From a valley of salt-scarred earth, the Wadi Netrun, priests gathered natron, a fine white powder soft as moon dust. It was the essence of the desert, a fine salt that had slept in the earth for ages. They packed this mineral blanket around the body, a cool and absorbent shroud. For 40 days and 40 nights, it drank every drop of moisture, a slow and patient kiss. The form dried into a quiet permanence, like driftwood shaped by time, suspended in a deep, timeless state. The desert's own chemistry had preserved a life's vessel for the eternal voyage. Then they turned to the inner organs. 4 ornate canopic jars were brought, each protected by one of the 4 sons of Horus. Imseti guarded the liver, Hapi the lungs, Duamutef the stomach, and Cubis Nuef the intestines. These vessels were like clay wombs, cradling the viscera in serene isolation. The faces on the lids stared into the darkness with calm, all-knowing eyes, keeping the sleeper's inner world safe for the path through the underworld's silent corridors. The organs slept, each in its own miniature tomb, awaiting reunification in the afterworld. The brain, however, was thought to be a mere secretion, a mucus of the mind. So, with a slender bronze hook, a tool delicate as a needle of light, they drew it out through the nostril. The movement was a floating rhythm, a dance of precision so gentle the face never stirred. The features stayed soft and untroubled, as if the dead were simply lost in a profound, peaceful dream, a mask of velvet repose. The hook moved like a slow breath, in and out, leaving the face a perfect mask. Finally, the linen wrappings. Finest flax, woven into a fabric pale as morning cream. Hundreds of yards were torn into strips, soft as whispers. They wound around the body layer upon layer, a cocoon of warmth. Between the folds, priests hid amulets, tiny guardians of stone and faience. The D-jade pillar was placed near the spine, a symbol of stability, the backbone of Osiris. It radiated a deep, steady warmth, like a low ember, to comfort the soul in the eternal sleep beneath the sands. The body became a sacred package, a gift to the gods, wrapped in the softest embrace of the earth. Let these images sink into your dreams, a soft lullaby of ancient ritual. Sleep now wrapped in the hush of history. Fragrant resins and aromatic oils were warmed by careful hands and poured over the quiet skin. Cedar oil, deep and sweet, and myrrh, with its soft, ancient breath, these precious substances sank in like a whispered promise, sealing the body in a calm, protective hush that seemed to pause the march of time itself. A soft ritual followed, known as the opening of the mouth. A priest would lift a small adze, its blade cool and still, and gently touch it to the silent face. This was not a harsh gesture, but a tender awakening, meant to let the spirit breathe again and speak in that vast, starlit quiet of the heavenly realm. High-status mummies were then layered into nested sarcophagi, a protective cocoon of painted wood and gleaming stone. Each layer was adorned with gold and cosmic scenes, a map of the night sky to wrap the soul in drifting light. It was a deep, sparkling journey, a voyage through an endless soft darkness toward the arms of the sun. During the Middle Kingdom, some turned to cartonnage, a yielding mixture of linen, glue, and plaster. This material was molded into an idealized likeness, a serene and peaceful face that would endure forever. The mask sat lightly, a warm, still expression of the person who had been, capturing their essence in a soft, eternal smile. The entire sacred process unfolded over 70 days, a span aligned with the celestial cycle of the star Sirius. It was a slow and meditative pace, each step handled with a quiet, enduring reverence. The steady hands worked as if time had grown soft, and every detail was a prayer for the long, deep, dreamless sleep ahead. The heart remained a silent guardian of every lived moment, waiting to be weighed against the feather's gentle touch in the quiet of the afterlife, where souls breathe truth. Warm, crystalline salts from distant valleys seeped through silent flesh, slowly drinking moisture drop by drop, until 40 days had passed and the body rested in perfect, arid stillness. With obsidian touch, they lifted the lungs, liver, stomach, and intestines into 4 alabaster jars, each guarded by a son of Horus, silent sentinels of the eternal peace. Scented resins and linen whispers filled the hollows of the cheeks, keeping the face serene, as if caught in a dreamless sleep that would never stir again, a timeless quiet. The mind, deemed useless for the journey ahead, was drawn out through the nose with slender hooks, leaving the face untouched in its silent, noble repose, a mask of eternal calm. Oils of cedar and myrrh anointed the silent form, their warm, woody breath rising like a prayer, perfuming the body for its divine drift among the stars. Intricate linen layers enfolded the form, tucking amulets of gold and deep blue lapis lazuli between folds, as silent guardians wrapped the soul in a cocoon of protective magic. A priest's soft ritual with a sacred adze touched the lips, awakening senses so the deceased might breathe and speak again in the tranquil fields of Aru. Nested coffins of sycamore and cedar, brushed with soothing blues and golds, formed a warm wooden shell, shielding the spirit as it floated gently toward the horizon. Small handwritten scrolls of the Book of the Dead rested in final chambers, whispering quiet spells and passwords to guide the soul through the twilight realms of the underworld. And now, dear listener, we have drifted softly through the ancient art of mummification, from the scent of cedary oils to the silent guidance of the Book of the Dead, and tonight's whisper of eternity is complete. If this dreaming has helped you drift towards sleep, please leave a gentle like, a small token for the night. And if you subscribe, I will be here like a faithful star, whenever you need a voice to guide you into rest. Good night, sleep as peacefully as a soul wrapped in golden amulets, and remember, the mysteries of mummification will always cradle you, in their ancient, star-bound embrace. Rest now. Everything is exactly as it should be.